Hi, everyone. It's Martin here. I'm here with Dr. Alex Sevigny, who is a friend of mine, a data scientist, a communicator, a thought leader, and who is the director of the McMaster Master of Communications program, where I just graduated. In fact, Alex was my capstone supervisor. And Alex, really, a lot of the research that you do and the writing you do and the thinking you do and really your practice is all about data science and communications. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. And I wanted to start just by saying everywhere we turn, we hear about data or big data. Can you tell us what makes up or what constitutes a big data set and how that maybe differs from the types of data that we as marketers and communicators are used to dealing with every day?
Right. That's a good question. So we're used to dealing with a lot of static data. We're used to dealing with things like, we commission a poll or a survey, we send out a questionnaire, we have a feedback form, we gather statistics maybe superficially through a glance at our Google Analytics or possibly at Facebook Analytics or other social media channels you might be using. And, so you'll gather a spreadsheet full of data that way, and you'll have something to say about the day's interactions or the week's interactions or whatever period of time. Okay, so that's the way we usually use data. Big data is different from that in terms of three things. One is volume. So when you're talking big data, and bear in mind there's no real definition of big data, one is volume. And so that means an enormous amount of data coming in, more than you could possibly handle, more than a team parsing it in the moment could handle. Okay. Second is velocity. The data are coming at you quickly, right? So let's say you're holding a live stream event and there are people commenting and you're tracking all of that in some way. That's an enormous amount of data coming in all at once. Or let's say you have data coming in from a sophisticated portal that you use to interact with and sell to customers, right? Some sort of online point of sale, right? You might be processing thousands of transactions and as well as customer comments. And so that's velocity. The third is variety. A lot of the data that we deal with is very standardized. It's, comes in a spreadsheet, it's numerical, or it's strictly qualitative. And, we glance at the qualitative and we summarize it, and we look at the spreadsheet and we perform little calculations on it.
Or our eyes glaze over.
Or our eyes glaze over, right. In a big data environment, it's likely that you'll have highly varied data. So you'll have some data that is coming in a very structured way. So it's all attached, can be given a numerical value, right? But then you'll also have a lot of data that's completely qualitative, unstructured, right? Where you can't really assign a numerical value, like human language, right? Which is highly unstructured, different every time you say something, and very hard for a computer to understand and parse. So those are the three ways in which a big data set are different from the way we're probably used to interacting with data: volume, velocity, and variety.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the role. Well, first of all, what is a data scientist? And if there's any overlap with communicators?
Sure. The term data scientist is relatively recent. I think that it's an interdisciplinary designation. I come from a background of linguistics and a little bit of cognitive science. Nobody that I went to school with called themselves a data scientist, but now possibly some of them might. Somebody who comes from applied economics, from quantitative sociology, from psychology, might call themselves a data scientist now because they're capable of dealing with data, right, in a structured way. But what differentiates them from a straight technician or a straight mathematician? I think it's four things. One is the ability to manipulate statistics, like to manipulate statistics. That's the wrong word. to use statistics, right? To compute things in statistics. A second one is I completely lost my track there.
Okay, so we'll edit this.
Right. Okay, maybe we can start that second question again.
Okay,
what makes a data scientist?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Whitney. So that part needs editing. We're going to start question 2 again. So We hear a lot about data scientists, and I'm wondering if you could just tell us what a data scientist does, and whether there's any overlap with what we do in marketing and communications.
Sure. So data science is a relatively new term. A lot of people that I went to school with, I come from a linguistics background and worked with a lot of cognitive scientists as well. They would not have called themselves data scientists when we were in school, but now some of them might as well. If someone comes from say an applied economics or a quantitative sociology or psychology background, and they use data a lot, and they're very familiar with how to use statistics, they might call themselves data scientists. But I think there are sort of four things that define a data scientist, or are emerging to define one. You'll see this definition often cited by people. And one is obviously a sufficient knowledge of statistics to be able to understand and use statistical software like SPSS or even Excel or Google Sheets. A second is, again, sufficient knowledge of programming, computer programming, usually in a language like Python or JavaScript or something like that data scientists or the people who use data will often use to interact with the database or to interact with a sophisticated spreadsheet. But then also two other categories. One is subject matter expertise or product knowledge. So a really deep understanding of the organization's mission, its products, the nature of its products. And fourth, the ability to communicate, to be the bridge. So to communicate between engineers and technicians and mathematicians who might not have the subject matter expertise and other parts of the business. So those are the four, I would say: knowledge of computer science or computer programming, knowledge of statistics, subject matter expertise, and the last one would be the ability to communicate with other parts of the business.
So we have two of those down, right? Communications and knowledge of the business or expertise in the business. What are the ways that we could maybe get up to speed on the other two?
Good question. I teach a course in sort of fundamentals of data science for communicators.
And I took that course. It was actually really good because it showed me what I didn't know, which is a lot.
Thank you for saying that. It's very nice. It was a challenging course to put together, but it came off quite well, I think. Thank you for saying it. So so there are courses out there. They're just starting, right? There probably aren't courses offered in every college or local learning organization near you, but it's starting to come out. So the option of taking a data science course for non-specialists or an introductory data science course for communicators or marketers, I would say that's a great place to start if you have that luxury. If you don't, there is a wealth of resources online. There are many online offerings from universities, from colleges that you can sign up for relatively little money. I won't name any of them just because there's such a plethora. I don't want to privilege one over another. But just if you do a quick search for online fundamentals of data science course, you'll probably find one. And a third one is to use online learning resources. In our course, I used Code Academy, which is a great place to start because they have a portion that is not paid, and they don't sponsor me in any way, but I do like what they're offering. Our students responded well to it. And the last thing I would say, and this is probably the best way, is build a relationship with a data scientist at your organization or amongst your friend group, and start to have conversations to gain the language and the sort of culture of data. Read Wired magazine, or the MIT Technology Review, and get a sense of what the big questions are, what the jargon is, and then start having those conversations with technical people so that you start to shape your understanding of what you don't know.
Okay. Yeah, that's great advice. My last question is, what's the biggest opportunity when it comes to marketing and communications professionals, data science and AI?
That's a very good question, because I don't think a lot of people feel included from a communications or marketing perspective in that conversation, and yet they should. Because if you think about it, if particularly in a world of data-driven decision making, or where we're using data to drive campaigns, where we're using it to evaluate relationships, where we're building or buying chatbots, or having automated digital assistants that are interacting with people, how those chatbots speak, the inherent biases that might be driving their communication with the public, who might not be represented in the data, what the scripts are that those chatbots are using. Those are all key decisions in terms of maintaining positive relationships with buyers, voters, donors, volunteers, etc., that your organization might be wanting to attract and build relationships with. And who knows those relationships better than the person who runs communications or works in communications for an organization? It's certainly not IT, who are probably setting up those chatbots. So you have to make sure that you're part of that conversation, that you're in the room or informing that conversation, or participating in the technical side, to the extent that those scripts and the nature of the data and who's represented and who's excluded is something that you understand and you can bring the strong communications voice to.
So a lot to think about and a lot to do, and really we have to be proactive in this.
Absolutely. We have to be proactive. Nobody's going to come and ask you because it doesn't spring to mind, particularly a technician or an engineer or a mathematician, a quantitative person. It's not going to, they're going to take a very utilitarian approach, right? And they won't necessarily think about the content in as their first priority, right? They'll think about making sure the system is operational as their first priority. So it's important to have those relationships with those people and be part of the conversation.
That's great. Thank you. Great advice. Thank you, Alex.
My pleasure.